Hi guys, it's Arielle. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you guys are all doing well. Welcome to your history lesson on Paris. If you've come to Paris and you've walked through the 9th or maybe the 2nd arrondissement and you've stumbled on what looks like this massive boulevard that goes on forever and ever, and it's lined with these beautiful restaurants and bars and cinemas and nightclubs and theaters, and it has all these fairy lights and it looks so beautiful and everyone's having a good time, then you have made it to the Grand Boulevards. And if this is not you, but you do want to come to one of the most lively places in Paris on your next trip, then I suggest you keep listening, because today I'm going to be telling you guys the history of these iconic Grand Boulevards de Paris. It all started when I was looking at this map from 1590, and again when I saw this map from 1598, and I was looking at both of them and I was like, what is this enclosure around the city of Paris? And it turns out it's a giant wall, but this was not the very first wall that we know of that surrounded Paris. These are the first Gallo-Roman fortifications that we know of from the 4th century, and these were laid out around the entire Ile de la Cité, the small little island that's literally in the center of the Seine, in the center of Paris, and these would have protected between 7,000 and 8,000 people. Now, the second fortifications that we know of following the Gallo-Roman fortifications are the Carolingian fortifications of the 11th century, and these were the first barricades to actually cross over onto the right side of the Seine. Next, we have the fortifications of Philippe Auguste from 1190 to 1215, and these covered both sides of the Seine, the left and the right, and these would have protected a population of 50,000. Moving on to the fortifications of Charles V, which were built between 1356 and 1383. These would have protected a population of about 200,000 and would have encompassed the area of the Louvre and also all of the private mansions in the Marais, which is the 3rd and 4th arrondissement. This is what these fortifications would have looked like in 1600. You can see that it is literally a giant wall that completely encircles Paris. But we are not done here, because as the wars waged on, it became essential to fortify the west side of Paris, and this is what we know today as the 8th arrondissement. This was done under Louis XIII and completed in 1630, and these fortifications would have protected a population of about 450,000, so quite a lot of people. So this is the final product. This map will show you exactly what these walls that were protecting Paris would have looked like in 1630. However, when Louis XIV came to power in 1643, he made a radical decision that would affect all of Paris and the Grand Boulevards. So essentially, he decided that France had won so many battles that the king was feeling very confident in his city. He felt like even without these walls, they were protected, they were safe. And so he chooses in 1670 to absolutely destroy all of these fortifications built by his father and Charles V. And in this place of these giant walls, he builds a 4-kilometer long promenade, a boulevard, and this goes all the way around the city. It goes from Bastille all the way down to La Madeleine, and if you look a little bit closer on this map, you can see a bunch of little dots along this new boulevard, and these would be all of the trees that were planted to make this new boulevard a very enjoyable place to promenade. So once these walls came down and this boulevard was sort of carved out along the exact same route of these fortifications, this is what the Grand Boulevard would have looked like. It was a very enjoyable place for people and carriages to enjoy their day, and it was actually used at this point in time as a way to mark the limits of the city. So you have the city up until the Grand Boulevard, and everything past it at this point in time would have been like the countryside. It would have been farmland. It would have been swampland. It would have been really underdeveloped areas. So all that to say, the Grand Boulevard that we know and that we love today were actually an initiative of Louis XIV and not a part of the Haussmannian renovations. A lot of people confuse the Grand Boulevard with Haussmann, but really they're at two totally different periods of time and from two very different people. The only remains that we have of these old fortifications are the Porte Saint-Denis and the Porte Saint-Martin. And these aren't even part of the original, but what happened is that when the walls were coming down, Louis XIV decided to have these two Arc de Triomphe sort of built in his glory, of course, to replace what the old entrances would have been into the city of Paris around the fortifications. Here I've taken a screenshot from Google Maps and I've drawn a red line that shows you what the Grand Boulevard would have looked like and still look like today that go from Bastille to Madeleine. So let's go through each boulevard one by one, that way you know their names. The very first boulevard we have is the Boulevard Beaumarchais, and this is the boulevard that starts the route. It starts at Bastille. Next we have the Boulevard des Filles du Calvaire, the Boulevard du Temple, the Boulevard Saint-Martin, the Boulevard Saint-Denis, Boulevard de Bonne Nouvelle, Boulevard Poissonnière, Boulevard Montmartre, Boulevard des Italiens, Boulevard des Capucines, and finally Boulevard de la Madeleine. So this is our route. Now we also have the Boulevard Haussmann. A lot of people know this boulevard because it is considered to be one of the most elegant streets in all of Paris, and we do have some very famous shopping centers along the Boulevard Haussmann, like the Galeries Lafayette and Printemps, and it's right behind the Opera House, so honestly a lot of people do come here, and it is typically associated with the Grand Boulevard because it is a Grand Boulevard, a large boulevard, but it is not part of the original Grand Boulevard, this original promenade that was built around the city of Paris. A fun little anecdote for you guys about the Boulevard du Temple is that it was actually nicknamed the Boulevard du Crime, the Boulevard of Crime, because this was a criminal hotspot in the 19th century. And what I mean by this is that over the course of 20 years, over 151,000 crimes of kidnapping and murder and theft took place along all of the theaters that lined this boulevard. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, this entire boulevard was razed to the ground when Haussmann turned Paris into a giant construction site, all with the exception of the Theatre des Arts. So these theaters largely don't exist anymore, but it is interesting. One other thing that is really special about the area that surrounds the Grand Boulevard is that in the early 1800s, we start to see these little passages being built. These passages are essentially covered shopping arcades that were very beautiful, aesthetic, and clean places for people to promenade that sort of stemmed off of the Grand Boulevard, which was rainy and dirty and muddy, especially with all of the horses and the carriages that were also coming along the Grand Boulevard. Some of my favorite passages that I really recommend that you check out when you come to Paris is the Passage Geoffroy and the Passage Verdot. They are essentially just an extension of one another. And the Passage Geoffroy is actually the very first passage in Paris that was built of glass and metal. And so you have this beautiful natural light that floods into this passage. You have a lot of great antique stores, hotels, very, very unique shopping that you can do in these passages. And again, they're just very aesthetic and beautiful, and you have to check them out when you come to the Grand Boulevard. So essentially, once this wall came down and this beautiful boulevard was built, and you have these little covered passages that pop up, people are loving this area, and we see a lot of the bourgeoisie and the nobility move towards this area and to build their private mansions. And when you have this group of very wealthy people that start moving into this neighborhood, you have a lot of other businesses that follow suit to cater to this new clientele. So you start to see a lot of restaurants and cabarets and theaters and bars that start to pop up, and business is booming. People are loving the Grand Boulevard. They really do become synonymous with party and pleasure, and we can see that this ambiance really has stuck on the Grand Boulevard. It is essentially a place where people go to enjoy a night out, to enjoy time spent with their friends, and I think it's amazing that for so long these boulevards have really been the place where you should go for entertainment, where you should go to have a good time. And I think for anyone who is a little bit less familiar with the layout of Paris, I do want to maybe share my favorite parts of the Grand Boulevard. That way you can better navigate your way along the boulevard when you come to Paris. I have the map here, again, a screenshot of Google Maps with the Grand Boulevard outlined in red, and then in black I have the outline of the 9th arrondissement, which is essentially where my favorite boulevards are located. I would say that the Boulevard Poissonnière, Boulevard Montmartre, Boulevard des Italiens, Boulevard des Capucines, and the Boulevard de la Madeleine are the most poppin' boulevard. These are the most energetic, eclectic, exciting, vibrant parts of the boulevard, in my opinion. Even during the day, there's so much going on. At night, you have all of these beautiful fairy lights and all of these patios filled in. It really is just such an enjoyable ambiance. So I definitely recommend that if you come to Paris and you want to check out the Grand Boulevard, you start with these ones. So yeah, that is it for my little lecture today. I hope you guys learned something new about Paris, a new area to discover. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know if you've been to the Grand Boulevard. What is your favorite part? If I've missed anything. Yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.